With costumes in general, and especially with Chagall, we wanted to show movement. He conceptualized these costumes for performance, and not just performance that is seen close, but one that's meant to be seen 30 feet away from the stage. And so rather than very, very fine embroidery, they have big, beautiful appliques, and they have pieces of chiffon falling off of the object for when the person moved, and they have painting, especially with Alecko, which was painted by Chagall, this beautiful painting.
When you're talking about theater, there are probably two kinds of designers, one of whom is the artist, who basically knows nothing whatsoever about how to put something together to make it fit. And there are certainly artists who have done amazing pieces, but essentially they're making a sculpture. Fashion designer sort of immediately thinks about its wearability. I mean, let's face it, if it's going to be ballet, has to be danced in. An opera costume or a ballet costume or a theater costume has to be worn again and again and again. So yeah, I would say that the construction of a theater costume has to be much better, or not necessarily technically better, but it has to be tougher.
Oftentimes these beautiful creations by fashion designers, there's only one piece of it made, and they don't go into full production. Whereas for Chagall, these costumes are made for a whole cast and conceptualized as one huge story to be shown. The costumes are made for the story specifically. Some of the challenges in working with the Chagall costumes was that, we're seeing these amazing photos of these costumes and these sketches, but we had to really look at the actual costumes to determine the kind of mounts, the kind of mannequins they would be displayed on. So there was a lot of time taken into us going to the places, the institutions that held a lot of these costumes, looking at them and really analyzing them to make sure that we did a good service in displaying them. Finally understanding the larger-than-life scale of a lot of these things and how these bodies, these human-like forms on these mannequins really transformed into monsters and animals, and you could see that connection between the vision that Chagall had for the performance and how they realized it with cloth. But in terms of materials, we do see a lot of the new blends for knits, for dancewear, coming in certain decades and being used. So, you have kind of like lycra blends and things like that in the later productions, which notes, that they're using what kind of fabrics were in hand and what was the best for the performer at the time, for the dancer to be comfortable and to really move their bodies. I mean, this is evident with Daphnis and Chloe.
Most contemporary designers are really adventurous with materials. For example, Chagall would paint directly on the costumes, which he did in Alecko and Daphnis and Chloe. So when they had to remake them, they would try to do it. But I was curious about whether foam was actually invented at the time, and did find out that, first of all, the first foam was invented in 1929, but it was commercially viable in the 40s. So those jumpsuits may have been made with foam as they are now. They were very brilliantly conceived. As you remember, they're outside with the foam for the structure, but then inside they were lined with almost a satin-like fabric with a zipper up the back. So getting in and out was very easy for the dancers to do. It's interesting too, because Chagall's method for making most of his costumes are like collage. As you remember, there are patches of fabric with, putting 2 or 3 fabric pieces on top of each other to make a different color, and would have made it very easy to repair tears, which must have been great for the costume shop, but also made things easier to dance in because you don't have to take the same care. So that was actually helpful, I think, his method of making things.
You cannot take a costume and have it fit a mannequin. You have to find a form that fits the costume. And in this case, you have many different body types. You have ballet dancers, you have young girls, you have children, you have opera singers of many sizes, you have forms that require masks, and all of this while also trying to convey movement. I really love Pan because of the way the costume was constructed to make him so larger than life. The platforms of his boots, which are covered by fur, in addition to the cape, which has this high collar cage and the horns, and then we selected the mannequin with its arms wide open. I was surprised when it was finally all on the mannequin how big he is. He's almost 90 inches tall, so you know, it was really incredible to see that. I think that was the first time in seeing him on a mannequin that I realized the kind of larger-than-life scale that the costume makers were trying to achieve in creating Chagall's vision.
I love the cow from the Magic Flute because the cow is just has these giant eyelashes and is wearing an ostrich feather, which isn't quite, but they're huge and lumpy and quite fantastical. But I have to say that the animals from the Firebird are my favorites. And I guess why, just because they've taken fantasy and they've put it together, and there's no way that you cannot be enchanted by those costumes.